Respected viewers, dear family of dreamers, beloved seekers of wisdom, I want you to close your eyes for just a moment and imagine something with me. Imagine that every decision you've ever made about money, every fear you've carried in your chest when the bills came due, every night you laid awake wondering if you'd ever break free, all of us leading you to this very moment. What if I told you that scarcity isn't about the money in your account, but about the prison you built, You see, I've watched people for decades, brilliant people, hardworking people, people who wake up before dawn and collapse after midnight, and yet they remain trapped, not by circumstances, but by something far more insidious, a voice, a whisper that tells them there's never enough, there will never be enough, you are not enough. Let me tell you about a young man I once knew. We'll call him Robert. Robert grew up in a home where his father worked 3 jobs. His mother sewed clothes late into the night. The electricity was shut off twice a year, like clockwork. And every single day, Robert heard the same phrase echoing through those thin walls: "We can't afford it." 3 words, simple words, but they became his gospel, his truth, his identity. Robert grew up. He got a decent job. He made more money than his parents ever dreamed of. But something strange happened. He still couldn't afford it, not because the money wasn't there, but because those 3 words had become the foundation of his entire worldview. He'd clip coupons for items he didn't need. He'd drive an extra 20 miles to save $2 on gas, burning $3 worth of fuel in the process. He'd lie awake at night convinced that disaster was always 1 paycheck away. This, my friends, is the scarcity mindset. And it is perhaps the most expensive thing you will ever own. Now, I want to be clear about something because this matters deeply. I am not. And listen carefully. I am not talking about the very real struggle of making ends meet, when you're working 2 jobs and your children need shoes and the rent is due. That's not a mindset problem. That's a resource problem. And it deserves respect, not lectures. But here's what I've learned after watching thousands of people navigate the waters of wealth and poverty. The scarcity mindset doesn't just affect the poor. It infects the rich. I've sat across from millionaires, people with more money than they could spend in 5 lifetimes, who were absolutely terrified of losing it all, who trusted no one, who saw every opportunity as a potential threat, who died wealthy and miserable. Because scarcity isn't about numbers on a page. It's about the story you tell yourself when you look at those numbers. Let me share something with you that changed my entire perspective. Years ago, I was reading about the Great Depression, and I came across something fascinating. There were people during that time, genuinely destitute people, who maintained what I can only describe as an abundance mentality. They'd share their last meal. They'd help a neighbor fix a roof. They'd find joy in a sunset or a song. And then there were others who had managed to keep some wealth, who became misers, hoarders, consumed by fear. What was the difference? Both groups lived through the same catastrophe. Both faced genuine scarcity. But one group allowed scarcity to define them, and the other refused. I think about this often, because in my own life, I've made terrible decisions from a place of fear. Oh, not fear of poverty, but fear nonetheless. Fear of missing out, fear of being wrong, fear of looking foolish. And every single time I made a decision from that place of contraction, that tight, anxious place in my chest, I regretted it. The best decisions I ever made, the ones that truly built lasting wealth and lasting peace, came from a different place entirely. They came from abundance. Not the abundance of having everything, but the abundance of knowing I'd be okay either way. Listen, when you operate from scarcity, you make desperate decisions. You chase get-rich-quick schemes. You overtrade in the market. You take jobs you hate because you're terrified of being without a paycheck. You stay in relationships that drain you because you think no one else will want you. You say yes when you mean no, and no when you mean yes. All because you're trying to protect something you're afraid of losing. Scarcity makes you small. It makes you reactive. It makes you focus on what you don't have instead of what you could create. I want to tell you about another person. We'll call her Maria. Maria came to this country with nothing, and I mean nothing. She had $200, a suitcase, and a dream that probably sounded foolish to anyone who heard it. She wanted to own her own business. Now, Maria didn't have the luxury of pretending she had resources she didn't have. She was keenly aware of every dollar, But here's what was different about Maria. She never, not once, said, I can't afford it. Instead, she asked a different question. How can I afford it? Do you see the difference? It's subtle, but it changes everything. I can't afford it closes the door. It ends the conversation. It puts you in a position of helplessness. How can I afford it? Opens possibilities. It engages your creativity. It makes you an active participant in your own financial destiny. Maria started cleaning houses. But she didn't just clean houses. She studied the wealthy families she worked for. She noticed how they thought, how they spent, how they invested. She read their books when they weren't home, with permission, of course. She asked questions. She learned. And here's what Maria understood that Robert never did. Scarcity wasn't her identity. It was her current circumstance. And circumstances can change. Within 5 years, Maria had saved enough to start a small cleaning business. Within 10, she owned a property management company. Within 20, she'd built real wealth, not because she had advantages, but because she refused to let scarcity define her story. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. That's a nice story, but you don't understand my situation. You don't know how hard it is. And you're right, I don't know your specific situation, but I do know this. The scarcity mindset will make whatever situation you're in exponentially harder, because it's not just about money. It affects everything. Scarcity makes you believe that if someone else succeeds, there's less for you. It makes you jealous, competitive in the worst ways, unable to celebrate other people's victories. It makes you hoard information, hoard connections, hoard opportunities, because you think there's a limited supply. But here's the truth that wealthy people understand, and I don't mean wealthy in dollars, I mean wealthy in spirit. Success is not a pie. Someone else getting a slice doesn't mean there's less for you. In fact, often the opposite is true. When people around you succeed, they create opportunities. They open doors. They prove what's possible. The abundance mindset says there is enough. There is enough opportunity. There is enough wealth. There is enough love. There is enough success. And most importantly, I am enough now. Let me tell you what breaking the scarcity mindset actually looks like. Because this isn't about positive thinking or affirmations or pretending your problems don't exist. This is about something much deeper, much more practical. I remember sitting with a friend of mine, a brilliant investor, who told me something that stuck with me for decades. He said, the poorest decision I ever made was buying that expensive car when I was 25, not because of the money I spent, but because of the mindset it revealed. I bought it from a place of proving something, of filling a hole, of showing the world I'd made it. He paused, took a sip of his coffee, and continued. The richest decision I ever made was turning down a job that paid 3 times my salary because I knew it would require me to compromise on things that mattered more than money. That decision that came from abundance, from knowing that opportunities would come again, from trusting myself. You see, breaking scarcity isn't about having more money. It's about changing the lens through which you see the world. Let me give you something practical, something you can use today, whether you have $10 or $10 million in your account. First, you must start paying attention to your language, not just what you say out loud, but what you say to yourself. Those internal conversations, they're writing the code of your financial future. When you look at your bank account and think, I'm so broke, you're not just describing a situation, you're creating an identity. I'm broke. It's very different from, I'm currently building wealth, same circumstances. Completely different story. I've watched people with negative net worth who spoke like millionaires and became millionaires. And I've watched people with millions who spoke like paupers and eventually lost everything because they made decisions from that frightened place. Your words matter, not because of some mystical law of attraction, but because they shape your perception, and your perception shapes your decisions, and your decisions shape your destiny. Second, and this is crucial, you must develop what I call intelligent generosity. Now, I can already hear some of you saying, wait, you're telling me to give away money when I barely have enough. No, listen carefully. Intelligent generosity isn't about giving away money you need for rent. It's about recognizing that even in scarcity, you have something to offer: your time, your knowledge, your attention, your encouragement. Here's why this matters. Scarcity makes you a taker. It makes you constantly focused on what you can extract from every situation. What's in it for me? How can I benefit? What can I get? But wealth, true wealth, flows toward people who create value, who give first, who think in terms of contribution rather than extraction. I learned this lesson the hard way. Early in my career, I was so focused on accumulating, on protecting what I had, on making sure I got my fair share, that I missed countless opportunities. Because people don't want to do business with someone who's desperately grasping. They want to work with people who are secure enough to be generous. Let me tell you about David. David was unemployed for 18 months. 18 months. His savings were gone. He was applying to hundreds of jobs. Nothing. The rejection was crushing his spirit. And then David did something unusual. He stopped focusing solely on getting a job and started offering value. He began writing detailed analyses of companies in his industry, not for money, just offering them. He'd send them to former colleagues, to people he admired, to companies he wanted to work for. No strings attached. Just, here's something I think you might find useful. 3 months later, David had 3 job offers. Not because the job market suddenly improved, but because he'd shifted from scarcity to abundance. From please hire me, I'm desperate, to here's the value I can create. This is what abundance looks like when you're barely getting by. It's not about pretending you have resources you don't have. It's about recognizing that you are a resource. Third principle, and this one saved my life more times than I can count. You must learn to separate your self-worth from your net worth. This sounds simple. It's not. We live in a society that constantly conflates the two. We measure success in dollars. We judge ourselves and others by houses and cars and vacations and brands. And somewhere deep inside, we start to believe that our value as human beings is tied to our bank balance. This is poison, pure poison. I've known miserable wealthy people and joyful poor people. I've known generous struggling people and stingy rich people. The money didn't determine their character or their happiness. Their mindset did. When you tie your self-worth to your net worth, you become terrified of losing money, because you're not just losing money, you're losing yourself. Every market downturn becomes an existential crisis. Every expense becomes a judgment. Every financial setback becomes proof that you're a failure. But when you separate the two, when you know that you have value regardless of your bank balance, something magical happens. You can take intelligent risks. You can invest for the long term. You can make decisions based on wisdom rather than fear. I remember the first major investment I lost money on, and I mean serious money, money that hurt. I was devastated not just because of the dollars, but because I felt like I'd proven I was an idiot, that I didn't deserve success, that I should never have believed I could build wealth in the first place. It took me years to realize that investment didn't make me a failure. It made me educated. Every wealthy person I've ever known has lost money, often a lot of it. The difference is they didn't let it define them. Fourth, you must start measuring wealth differently. The scarcity mindset measures wealth by subtraction. What do I lack? What don't I have? What could I lose? The abundance mindset measures wealth by addition and multiplication. What do I have? What can I build? What can I create? What can I leverage? I want you to try something. Right now, make a list of your assets, but not just financial assets. Everything. Your health, your relationships, your skills, your knowledge, your time, your creativity, your resilience, your ability to learn. Most people, when they do this exercise honestly, realize they're wealthier than they thought. Not wealthy enough to retire, but wealthy enough to build from, wealthy enough to invest, wealthy enough to create value. Because here's the secret that scarcity blinds you to. You don't need much to start. You need something, and you have something. The question is whether you're willing to see it and use it. Let me tell you about Sarah. Sarah was a single mother working 2 jobs. Every financial guru would look at her situation and say she had nothing to invest, no extra money, no time, no resources. But Sarah did something brilliant. She invested her lunch breaks. Instead of scrolling on her phone or chatting with coworkers, she spent 30 minutes every day learning about investing, reading books from the library, watching educational videos, taking notes, 6 months of lunch breaks. That's about 60 hours of education. Sarah didn't spend a single dollar she didn't already have, but she invested something more valuable: her attention, her time, her commitment to growth. 2 years later, when Sarah finally had a tiny bit of money to invest, she knew what to do with it. She wasn't gambling. She wasn't panicking. She was strategic because she'd already made the most important investment in herself. That's what abundance thinking looks like in practical terms. It asks, what do I have, not what do I lack? Fifth principle, and this might be the most important. You must develop patience that borders on stubbornness. Scarcity is impatient. It wants results now. It needs proof immediately. It chases quick wins and shortcuts and magic formulas. Abundance understands that real wealth, the kind that lasts, the kind that matters, is built slowly, brick by brick, decision by decision, year by year. I've watched so many people destroy themselves financially because they couldn't wait. They'd take on debt they couldn't afford because they wanted the lifestyle now. They'd jump from job to job, chasing slightly higher salaries instead of building skills and reputation. They'd day trade instead of investing because investing requires patience and day trading promises immediate gratification. And you know what? Sometimes the gambling pays off. Someone makes a quick profit. Someone gets lucky on a risky bet. And that validates the scarcity mindset. It says, see, you have to take desperate chances because that's the only way people like us get ahead. But that's not wealth building. That's lottery playing. And the house always wins in the end, real wealth, the kind that changes your family's trajectory for generations, comes from a completely different place. It comes from the compounding of good decisions, the patient accumulation of assets, the quiet discipline of living below your means, not out of deprivation, but out of strategy. Let me share something personal with you, something I don't talk about often. There was a period in my life, early on, when I made good money. Not extraordinary, but good, comfortable. And I did what most people do. I spent it. Nice dinners, nice clothes, a car that impressed people. I wasn't drowning in debt, but I wasn't building anything either. And then one day I was having lunch with a man who'd built real wealth, not flashy wealth, quiet wealth. And I asked him, because I was young and foolish enough to ask direct questions, what's the secret? How did you do it? He smiled, took a long pause, and said something that changed my life. I spent 10 years living like I was still in college while making a professional salary. Everyone thought I was crazy. My friends bought houses and cars and took fancy vacations. I drove a 15-year-old Honda and lived in a small apartment. But every month, every single month, I was investing not in get-rich-quick schemes and boring, reliable assets. And then one day, about a decade in, the compound interest and appreciation crossed the threshold. And suddenly I had options, real options, financial independence, freedom. He leaned in closer and said, the scarcity mindset says enjoy it now because tomorrow isn't promised. The abundance mindset says plant trees today whose shade you'll enjoy tomorrow. Both acknowledge uncertainty, but one builds despite it and the other consumes because of it. That conversation planted a seed. It didn't fully bloom immediately. I'm human. I made plenty more mistakes. But it started a shift in how I thought about money and time. You see, breaking the scarcity mindset requires understanding something profound about time. Scarcity thinks in the short term. What can I get today? What feels good right now? What solves my immediate problem? Abundance thinks in decades. What am I building? Who am I becoming? What foundation am I laying for the person I'll be in 10 years? This doesn't mean you never enjoy life. That's a misunderstanding that leads to the opposite problem. Hoarding for a future that never comes, dying rich but never having lived. That's scarcity in disguise, just inverted. True abundance says, I can enjoy life, A, and build wealth. I can have meaningful experiences, A, and D, invest for the future. I can be generous, A, and financially secure. These aren't contradictions. They're complementary when approached with wisdom. Let me tell you about James and Michael, two brothers. Similar circumstances, similar educations, similar opportunities, but radically different financial outcomes. James operated from scarcity. Every bonus he got, he immediately spent on something visible, something that would show people he was successful. He bought a boat he used twice. He leased luxury cars he couldn't afford. He took vacations on credit cards. Not because he was enjoying life, but because he was terrified people would think he wasn't successful. The scarcity mindset doesn't always look like penny pinching. Sometimes it looks like desperate overspending to prove you're not scarce. Michael operated from abundance. He made almost the same salary as James, but he asked himself different questions. Instead of, what can I buy with this bonus? He asked, what can I build with this money? Instead of, what will impress people? He asked, What will give me freedom? 20 years later, James was still working a job he hated, couldn't retire, stressed about money despite a good income, trapped by lifestyle inflation and debt. Michael had options. He could work because he wanted to, not because he had to. He could take risks. He could be generous. He could say no to things that didn't align with his values. Same starting point, different mindsets, different destinations. Now, I want to address something that's probably on your mind. Maybe you're thinking, this all sounds great for people who have money to invest. But what about when you're truly struggling? When every dollar is already spoken for? When there's literally nothing left at the end of the month? This is a fair question. And I want to honor it with a serious answer, not platitudes. If you're in genuine financial crisis, if you're struggling to keep a roof over your head and food on the table, the first priority is survival, not investment philosophy. That's not scarcity mindset. That's reality. And anyone who tells you otherwise is either naive or selling something. But, and this is important, even in the hardest circumstances, mindset matters, because scarcity thinking can keep you stuck even when opportunities appear. I knew a woman named Patricia. Patricia was in debt, serious debt, the kind that keeps you awake at night. Credit cards maxed out, medical bills piling up, barely making minimum payments. By any objective measure, she was drowning. Patricia could have declared bankruptcy. Many financial advisors would have told her to start fresh, wipe the slate clean, but Patricia did something different. She decided to face it, to own it, to work through it, not out of shame, but out of a belief that she could, that she was capable of solving this problem. She got a second job. She sold things she didn't need. She negotiated with creditors. She created a plan, not a hopeful plan, not a wishful plan, a mathematical plan, this much per month to this debt, this much to that one, in this order, for this long. It took her 4 years of sacrifice, 4 years of saying no to things her friends were doing, 4 years of working when she was exhausted. But here's what happened during those 4 years that was more valuable than paying off the debt. Patricia developed an abundance mindset in the middle of scarcity. She proved to herself that she could solve hard problems, that she had more capability than she realized, that she could make a plan and execute it, that she was someone who kept commitments, even commitments to herself. When the debt was finally paid off, Patricia didn't just have a clean balance sheet. She had transformed who she was. She had confidence, discipline, self-trust. And those things are more valuable than money, because they enable you to create money again and again. Compare that to someone who declares bankruptcy out of convenience, never addresses the habits and thinking that created the debt in the first place. They get the fresh start, but within a few years, they're often back in debt, because the external circumstances change, but the internal mindset didn't. This is what I mean by breaking scarcity from the inside out. It's not about your current circumstances. It's about how you face them. Sixth principle, and we're getting to the heart of it now. You must learn to see money as a tool, not as safety. This is subtle but crucial. Scarcity mindset sees money as protection, as a buffer between you and disaster, as the thing standing between you and catastrophe. So you hoard it, you grip it tightly, you make decisions from fear of losing it. But here's the paradox. When you treat money as safety, you never feel safe, because there's never enough. There's always another disaster waiting, another potential loss, another thing to fear. The abundance mindset sees money as a tool for building, for creating, for serving, for providing options, and tools are meant to be used, not hoarded. This doesn't mean being reckless. A carpenter takes care of his tools. He maintains them. He doesn't abuse them, but he uses them, because tools have no value sitting in a drawer. I learned this from watching my mentor make investment decisions. He never invested out of fear of missing out. He never held on to bad investments out of fear of taking a loss. He used money strategically, intelligently, without emotional attachment. When an investment went bad, he'd say, well, that tool broke. Time to get a better one. No drama, no identity crisis, no proof that he was a failure. Just information, feedback, a lesson learned. When you can reach that level of emotional detachment from money, not indifference, but detachment, you make infinitely better decisions, because you're not protecting your ego. You're not trying to prove something. You're just playing the game well. Seventh principle, you must surround yourself with abundance thinkers. This is hard. really hard, because often the people closest to you, family, old friends, your community, they may be operating from scarcity, and they'll try to pull you back down, not out of malice, out of fear. Fear that you'll leave them behind. Fear that you'll change. Fear that your success highlights their stagnation. They'll say things like, "Who do you think you are? People like us don't do that. Remember where you came from? Don't get too big for your britches. That's too risky. You should just be grateful for what you have." These statements, they sound like wisdom. They sound like humility, but they're scarcity speaking. They're the voice of people who are afraid to dream, trying to convince you not to dream either. Breaking scarcity might mean loving people from a distance. It might mean finding new mentors, new friends, new communities that think bigger, that believe in possibility, that celebrate your growth instead of resenting it. This doesn't make you disloyal. It makes you intentional. You're not abandoning your roots. You're expanding your branches. And so we arrive at the deepest truth, the one that changes everything if you're willing to receive it. Breaking the scarcity mindset isn't really about money at all. It never was. It's about trust. Trust in yourself. Trust in your ability to solve problems, to adapt, to create value, to recover from setbacks. Trust that you are resourceful in the true sense of that word. Not that you have resources, but that you are a resource. That within you lies the capacity to generate, to build, to contribute, to grow. Scarcity at its core is a crisis of trust. It says, I can't trust myself to handle what comes. I can't trust the universe to provide opportunities. I can't trust that things will work out, so I must grip, I must control, I must protect, I must fear. Abundance at its core is radical trust. It says, I don't know exactly how things will unfold. I can't control everything, but I trust my ability to navigate whatever comes. I trust that opportunities exist. I trust that I can create value. I trust that I am enough. Let me tell you one final story. And this one is personal in a way the others weren't. There was a moment in my life when I had to make a choice. I had a secure position, good income, stability, everything the scarcity mindset tells you to protect at all costs. But I had an opportunity, a risky one that could lead to something extraordinary or could fail completely. I sat with that decision for weeks, months actually. And I realized that my hesitation wasn't about the practical risks. I'd done the math. I'd analyzed the scenarios. The practical risks were manageable. My hesitation was about identity, about what it would mean if I failed, about whether I could trust myself in unknown territory, about whether I was the kind of person who plays it safe or the kind who builds something meaningful. And in that moment, I understood something that changed everything. The scarcity mindset wasn't protecting me. It was imprisoning me. It was keeping me small, not because staying small was wise, but because staying small felt safe. I took the risk. I won't tell you it was easy. I won't tell you there weren't moments of terror and doubt and regret. But I will tell you this. Even if it had failed, I would have been okay, because I would have proven to myself that I was brave enough to try, that I trusted myself enough to take the leap, that I was someone who bet on themselves, and that is worth more than any amount of money. You see, my friends, my dear, respected, beloved friends who have walked with me through this journey today, the greatest wealth you will ever accumulate is not in your bank account. It's in your character, in your resilience, in your wisdom, in your peace of mind, in your ability to trust yourself and life itself. People with scarcity mindsets can accumulate millions and still feel poor, still feel anxious, still feel one disaster away from losing everything, because the poverty is internal, not external. And people with abundance mindsets can have very little and feel rich, feel capable, feel at peace, feel excited about what they're building, because the wealth is internal, not external. So if you take nothing else from our time together today, take this. You are not your bank balance. You are not your debt. You are not your current circumstances. You are the accumulation of every choice you make, every lesson you learn, every time you choose courage over fear, growth over comfort, possibility over limitation. Breaking the scarcity mindset begins with a decision to see yourself differently, not as a victim of circumstances, but as a creator of circumstances, not as someone who lacks, but as someone who builds, not as someone who fears loss, but as someone who trusts their ability to create again. It continues with small actions, daily actions, changing your language, practicing generosity even when it's hard, investing in yourself before you invest in anything else, making decisions from abundance rather than fear, measuring your wealth by what you can create, not just what you currently have, and it culminates in freedom. Not the freedom of never having to work, not the freedom of infinite money, but the freedom of knowing, truly knowing in your bones that you will be okay, that you can handle what comes, that you are enough. This is the wealth that cannot be taken from you, cannot be taxed, cannot crash in a market downturn, cannot be stolen or lost or devalued. This is the wealth that you carry within you always, even when you're barely getting by, even when the account is empty, even when the road is hard and long and uncertain. Because abundance was never about having everything. It was about recognizing that you have something. And that something, when cultivated with patience, when invested with wisdom, when protected with discipline, when shared with generosity, that something becomes enough, more than enough. So go forward from this moment with your eyes open. Notice when scarcity speaks. Notice when fear drives your decisions. Notice when you're gripping instead of building, protecting instead of creating, contracting instead of expanding. And in those moments, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, what would abundance do? What would trust do? What would the highest version of myself do? And then do that, not perfectly, not all at once, not without fear or doubt or setbacks, but do it. One decision at a time, one day at a time, one act of faith at a time, because you are not building a bank account. You are building a life. You are building a legacy. You are building yourself into someone who knows deeply and unshakably that they are capable of creating value, solving problems, and navigating uncertainty. And that, my friends, that is true wealth. That is abundance. That is freedom. May you walk forward with wisdom in your mind, courage in your heart, and trust in your spirit. The journey is long, but you are equipped for it. Go build something beautiful.